Hello. Today, what I'm going to do is take a bit of a recap and throw ourselves back and ask the question why, because so many people seem to be thinking to themselves, this Great Recession thing, or this problem that's going on now around the world, seems to have been going on a dreadfully long time. Why? So, a quick heads up on why. Okay. Since the Great Depression in the 30s, there have been series of recessions. Now, what a normal recession is a business cycle where business get it wrong, basically, for one thing, for one reason or other. There's a bit too much excitement somewhere along the line, and some group of people get their business plan wrong. A classic example was the dot-com crash of 2000, 2001, where basically everyone got too excited about communications and internet and all that. And there was too much business in that space, and it had to be cut down to a size that would go forward. So there was a recession where a lot of them went bust, and it was quite useful. There was lots of fiber optic cable all around the place, and you got Amazon, Google and things like that, who were the survivors of it. And that's Schumpeterian destruction, from an economist called Schumpeter. And the destruction is the destruction of the ones that couldn't hold on, and they didn't hold on, and they've gone. The recession goes by, and the strong are left in place with infrastructure that's built, and you just go on. And that is a business cycle. And there have been lots of recessions, linking these recessions since the Great Depression. But this Great Recession, as it's being called, is a different animal. It's more like the Great Depression. But let's just talk about this one as it is now. Now, I've only got one chart, which you'll see on the website, because I'll put this one video out on YouTube and Vlogadome. Is this chart that I'm looking at now, that you can see on the website, but you won't need to go there. I can describe it to you. I'm going to describe the information from the United States of America via the Fed information data, but it's quite similar across the Western world. Right? There are two lines. The first one we're going to deal with is debt service ratio, and that's on the left axis, if you can see it. And debt service ratio is a low percentage number, because it's the amount of money that you're paying out that goes towards debt service payments. So this chart goes back to just before 1980 and the recession of 80-81, which ran into 83, but 80-81, where debt service ratio, the amount of the percentage of payments going out towards debt servicing at that time, was 11%. The Fed at the time brought interest rates down, and that made the debt service ratio less. It brought it down to 10.5% because of variable rate debts were brought down to the lower number, because the Fed brings the Fed funds rate down. Okay, so what happened there in 1980 was that no, we'll leave that. So that often did bring the end to a recession. That's the way a central bank would help. It would bring the interest rates down so companies could borrow easier, and households could borrow easier. And then the economy would pick up again, and people would start buying stuff again, and the companies would start selling stuff again. And you got economy. The economy is basically just transactions. So That debt service ratio by 1986 had got itself over 12% and hovered around 12% until 1990-91, where there was another recession. The Fed brought interest rates down, and by 1994 the debt to service ratio was down to 10.5 again. From then on, from 94 on to the start of this Great Recession, that debt service ratio did nothing but go up. It even went up through the dot-com crash that I talked of there. And even the Fed bringing interest rates down after the dot-com crash and 9/11, interest rates were brought down, but even still debt service ratio increased, and it went up through 12%, 13% and 14% at the time of this Great Recession. So what subsequently happened, that great falling off, I've put the vertical lines in on this chart. They're normally put in by the Fed, but this isn't an actual Fed chart. This is actually from Goldman Sachs, but don't worry about it. So I've put the vertical grey lines in for recessions. You can see for this Great Recession it should be wider, but I couldn't get the wider line in. The debt service ratio is now down again to 10.5, where the Fed would be thinking, well, we've done our job. We've brought the interest rates down as low as they can go, and now it is up to households and companies, corporations, to get their shit together, to do some buying and selling and get the economy going again. Basically, that should be it for them, except the big problem now lies in the other line, the grey line, which is debt to income ratio. That is the amount of debt, should we call the blue line flow and the grey line stocks? It's not really right, but it's closer. It's the stock of debt you've got in comparison to your annual salary. If you've got an annual salary of 50,000 something or others, and you've got debt of 50,000 something or others, that's 100% debt. So that's the percentage scale on the right hand axis. And it started down in 1980 at the time of the recession at just over 55, say 60% debt to income ratio. So you had 50%, 50,000 salary, let's say, and you'd have debt of 30,000. 60%, is that right? Something like that anyway. 5 6s are 30, should be right. And actually, at the time of that recession, 80 to 83, that came down. That debt to income ratio came down from 60 down to 55. Either incomes were going up, or debt stock was going down, and that actually went down through 1982. But for the next 30 years it went up and up and up, and it's gone from its 55 in 1982-83 through 65, 75, 85, 95, 105, 115, all the way up to 125%. Now this is where the problem lies. The difference between the blue line and the grey line after the Great Recession, or now if you like. The blue line, the debt service ratio, has gone right down to its lowest level that the Fed can bring it down to, or central banks in the Western world can bring it down to. Your variable rate debt is costing less, or new debt that you're taking on is costing less as a percentage of your income. But, and this is the great big but, and the huge problem that the world has got that I've been talking about beforehand, and we'll talk about it again, it's the debt stock that sticks. And it sticks at a big number, and you just can't get it down. The Fed can't get it down without paying it off or defaulting on it. Yeah. You could even call it inflating away, but really for that grey one you need more income to pay it off, or you need the less debt, and you don't get the less debt unless you pay it off. And that has stuck. It got up to 125 for the people that can't see the chart. It got to 125 and now it's at 105. It is coming down, but it's come from 55. And whereas the debt service ratio has come from 14 down to 10.5, really low, that stock of debt is up there and stuck up there. And it's stuck up there not just in the States, in the UK, in Europe, in Canada, in Australia. It's stuck up there for all of the Western world. And that debt, just to repeat again, only goes down when you pay it down. That number does not alter. Important to note, in a deflation, even in a huge deflation, your wages might go down, the price of a six-pack of beer might go down, but that debt will never go down because it's a written contract. And that is the problem, that grey line. And that is why this recession is going on and on and on, and why I'm going on and on about debt, because that debt stock is hanging out there still. And it's just too much. And in these two numbers, debt to service ratio, debt to income ratio, income, the amount of money you've got, is a part of that. So it's incomes have to go up or the debts have to come down somehow. And as we're seeing, those incomes aren't going up and the debts aren't coming down. And that's why we're just stuck with this problem, that we haven't got that amount of disposable income. The central banks have done all they can by getting the variable rates down as low as they can, getting the debt service ratio down. But those debt stocks are still hanging out there. Right, I think I've repeated that into the ground now. So that was my coming back to show that's what we must always remember, that it's that debt stock that's the real problem. And deflation would cause havoc for it. And this is why central banks are doing all they can that deflation doesn't grab hold of the entire economy. And they're going to have to do more. I'll leave it there. Thanks, bye.